G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week, and you've got some plans with your friends or family or however you choose to do it, that you're having a great time. Now today we do have a lot to talk about. So of course we're going to look at the north. I'm going to talk about and show you what I was sent both off the ground and from some other contacts as well. Of course, this isn't the only area moving. I know a lot of pages that haven't shown maps for months are now only showing this, but we need to look at the other well over 1,000 kilometers of front line and see where things are shifting, as that just doesn't go away. I want to talk about Mexico, and I want to talk about some strikes on airfields and a little bit of everything. We've got some geolocations, everything coming together. But firstly, I want to speak about what's on the ground, and what I will say is it does appear that the Kursk operation, the offensive there, is somewhat stabilising, and I'll show you on the maps that there's a lot less ground taken today, or even then some counter-offensive in some areas. I'll show you on this, but we have spoken about the danger of, if Ukraine stop moving, then those Russian weapons like the FABs, like the artillery, which they have in far more numerous numbers, and of course are going to be brought to bear even more effectively than in the Donbass due to being in Russian territory and the amount of air defense safety that they will have. Therefore, it may not be beneficial for Ukraine to actually come to a complete halt. Whether that's moving forwards or backwards or left and right, it doesn't matter. Now, I'm going to have to be very careful with some wording here. So I'm just going to read this directly of how I am to say it. Now, there are some rumours around an OPSEC, operational security leak, regarding the deployment of Western Special Forces elements about to enter Ukraine within the next few weeks. But at this point, it is purely speculation and rumours. Interestingly, this is not with United States involvement. It will be other countries, but not including the US. There have been elements of many countries in special forces roles in training, advising, and counter-espionage since 2014, but that this would be in more a kinetic sense. So deal with that as you will. Again, like I say, this is rumours, speculation. It was a very loose leak OPSEC somewhere, but it will be interesting to see if and what changes over the next coming weeks or months on the ground. But with everything, wait until there's real confirmation before we actually say X or Y or Z has happened. Now, sorry, I only just got my coffee, it's early here. Let's talk about what I've been sent across from on the ground in regards to the north. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you've been sleeping under a rock and you're not watching Willie's videos, and therefore Willie's not getting AdSense money, which is what all YouTubers are here for apparently. Anyway, but here's Ukraine in the centre, here's the capital of Kyiv. The red areas are occupied by Russia since 22, the purple since 2014. Now up in the northeast here, between Sumy, which is Ukraine, Kursk, which is Russia, we have now a few days old that Ukraine has pushed into Russian territory here by these blue. The blue on this map means under 2 weeks Ukrainian advancement. Now, the grey zone here is contested areas. This deep state map hasn't updated here today. It's updated in other areas today, but not here. So it will be interesting to see exactly where the other maps are showing once I overlay these, as I've got some geolocations that are outside of where this is as well. But let's look at what I've been sent off the ground to. Now, I will say this guy just messaged me going dark. I'll let you know how we go in a bit. Everyone prepared in Sumy and Kharkiv for the last 3 months, and everyone was promised to be equipped for a blitzkrieg offensive to Kursk and west of Kharkiv to apparently flank the enemy Kharkiv offensive, of course, where Russia pushed down into Kharkiv. But this was changed at the last minute. The 80th, 82nd and 22nd were supposed to use drone units to fast embed across the border, and sadly it did not work as predicted. Fast forward to day 2, and we were supposed to have anti-drone defense, but it did not materialize. Now, something I do want to say in this is we did see a hell of a lot of Russian ISR watching elements crossing the border, watching elements on the Ukrainian side of the border and within as well. That this was seen very quickly. It wasn't able to be counted quickly, but it was definitely seen. We lost strikers and other infantry fighting vehicles due to incompetence. We should have had EOS slingers, so air defense, to suppress FPV and surveillance drones to prevent losses. We did not get the anti-air we needed to stop the FABs. If we cannot suppress enemy air assets, the whole offensive will fail. Ministry of Defence are half committed to this offensive, and it seems as they had 6 months to prepare, and so much is lacking to a new effective combined arms offensive. The Area of Operations does not have the correct IPB, so intelligence preparation, or MD cover, which is most dangerous course of action. There is no daily AAR, so after action reports, organised either. If we can actually get to the objectives, it will be a miracle. The 103rd are supposed to suppress enemy artillery fire. We all know where the enemy assets are stored, and they were supposed to be eliminated before we crossed. Half-assed attempt only. We need to pepper pot this advance to deny enemy resources to make this work, not just eliminate air assets, including drones. So pepper pot means like forward, 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 like how you move in an infantry section attack or something like this. So that is someone on the ground, and he will update me as we continue going. But speaking about where the objectives were and some of the problems that Ukraine has faced on the ground, then making that balloon effort out. But it is amazing if you don't release a movie trailer before you go on the offensive, how much more successful then it can be. I was also sent this off another contact on the ground working too. It's basically the last chance push that's beginning now. So before then what we look at for the end of the year, what's happening in Pokrovsk, then potential deals, negotiations, all of this as we've spoken about in length. So let's actually then have a look at the north. So here is the map. We spoke about this yesterday on here, hasn't changed. But we have then the Noel reports map, and this is where I say that things are looking like some things are stabilising then a little bit. AFU confirms gains now of 24.5 square kilometres. So I'm not saying that isn't nothing, but in the first days where you had 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 25 square kilometres around about is a lot less. And what this is of course, troops get tired, you run out of stores, but also it has had time now for Russian reinforcements to start them pouring into this area to try and halt these advances. What I have spoken about is as all these resources arrive, I wouldn't be surprised if we see then another front line open up somewhere as well. Now, Western Sudzha is highly likely taken by the armed forces of Ukraine. So we see in his map here showing that half of Sudzha. Now, we then have a geolocation here of these guys with a Ukrainian flag, and that this is geolocated then in Sudzha right here. So the western side, that there's definitely some level of occupation there. Whether there is control of it all itself, it's very, very unknown. So this is then the Syriac maps, and what you can see on this map compared to his map yesterday is that Russia has taken background in multiple axes here. Russian army retook serious positions in then these axes. Clashes with the Ukrainian army are happening here too, and that is the only update he has today. As well you can see in Sudzha that there are then blue zones heading in as well, maybe behind where some of those geolocations are. But again, with these maps, with how fluid the front line is, it's very, very difficult to get an idea of actually where things are sitting. But I need to make a point on this. Presence and holding ground are very, very different things. And a lot of the maps are showing where there's Ukrainian forces present as occupied in control, and that is incorrect. Just because a DRG group has popped up somewhere in Kadenivo out here does not mean that is held under control territory at all. And as we can see by this map, and I'm highly critical of this map as you will be aware, but that this has the under control is significantly smaller than the grey zone that is, there may be a presence, but it's still being contested. And that is one thing that a lot of people, I don't think, are taking into account. Just because there's ex-troop there, it's like if Russia just paratrooped in some dude into Kyiv, that doesn't then mean that that is under control. You could maybe say it's contested, but a DRG element somewhere, it's a massive problem for those forces, but it doesn't mean then it is fully under control. And what will become in the next few days is, I think this will slow down, potentially even come to a stop as those reinforcements come in. We'll see if there's secondary actions planned by Ukraine somewhere else, or those DRG elements to set off somewhere. But if it does come to a stop, it's going to be interesting to see how quickly that Ukraine can actually dig in positions, because you're going to need to as soon as you come to a stop. If they have to withdraw to better positions in some areas too. And it'll be interesting to see how Russia is able to bring arms to bear in areas too, because once it stops, right out here, I think that they'll just be dropping fabs to try and move this back, and that's going to be a big problem. I think Ukraine have to keep moving in this. If you've got a smaller force, you don't have the amount of suppression on the air defense assets that you may need, you're going to have to continue moving. And that's why people say you get in the road and just keep going. Yeah, that's why things got so deep. And it's very, very difficult to actually turn back. Now, the Kremlin has had a lot of mixed messaging about the state of control here. From everything of we've got it under control in day one to it's out of control to this to that, and we've seen what some of the leaders have also told Putin. Now, what this leads to, and I've been highly critical of things like this before by many different governments, of trying to put a message out into the world that they've got something under control when it's obviously out of control. Because what this then leads is the civilians in the areas, they don't then understand the severity of what's happening, and they may choose to stay, or don't worry, we don't need to leave, or this or that. Next thing, they're in an active bloody conflict zone and they have no idea, and there's dudes rolling down the street with bloody weapon systems. And I said the same on the initial beginnings of the war in Ukraine, the 24th of Feb too. Now, there are reasons why this may be done, but at the end of the day, if you're putting out messaging that is incorrect or fits a narrative, it is affecting people in those areas too. Now, there's also, the Kremlin has announced that there is a counter-terrorism operation, KTO, that has been implemented in both Kursk and Belgorod region too, due to the increased sabotage and what they say terrorist threats from Ukraine. So in Kursk and Belgorod, due to these crossings, as well as bolstering other areas of defense in other fronts due to the threat, like we've spoken about, that there could be another crossing somewhere else. Now, many people like to speak about the nuclear power plant out in Kursk. Now, what I will say is this is still a hell of a long way away. And I spoke to a friend specifically about this yesterday. The first point we really got stuck on was, could it jeopardize not only the 10-point peace plan, because number one is nuclear security, but of course relationships with other countries as you are actively attacking a nuclear power plant. So I don't believe this was the goal. I don't know. But we both did agree that being a single point, so the nuclear power plant is a single point, this could be and will be incredibly well defended and an easy spot to defend, as it's one area hardened out from this. So if Ukraine is able even to get this deep, you're going to go into an incredibly well-defended area, and you're going to need a very coordinated attack with other elements. To even think about this, you're going to have artillery way up into Russian territory, aircraft in the air too. You're going to need all the suppression of air defenses. You're not 10, 20 Ks out. You're more like 60, launching an attack on an already incredibly hardened area. So that would be interesting to see if something will happen there. I don't think so, but I guess we will see. So let's have a look at some strikes, have a look at some footage, and I want to talk red lines as well. So I'm just looking at my notes to see if I've missed anything. I don't really think that I have. So we did see then a Russian convoy column was absolutely smashed by HIMARS. Now, I probably can show this on YouTube because it's Russians, but I'm not going to. It's on the Telegram if you'd like to. It is fairly confronting footage. So we see these column down here hit by HIMARS ATACMS, as well as other munitions too. Now, there was significant losses in this, but it is being absolutely blown out of the water. The Russia is estimated to have lost 500 to 1,000 soldiers in just one strike in Russia last night. Now, this number is just ridiculous. Now, this number of how many will actually be killed in this is in the dozens or probably low triple figures. It is a massive attack. But 500 to 1,000, there's 14 vehicles. Not every vehicle is going to be just packed with troops. And even if they are, you're talking maybe 15, maybe to 25 troops, especially with gear. Trucks get incredibly tight if you've ever been in a military truck with gear on, which most people haven't been. 500 to 1,000, how many guys you're talking per truck? Massive attack, but numbers like this are just ridiculous. But thousands of people do believe it and then spread from there. And I just think the truth still matters, regardless if it's on your side of where your narrative, your biases sit. However, truth still matters, and numbers like that, like 1,000 guys in 14 trucks, unless they're all 3'1", which is like my height, it's not happening. But we have seen that A lot of reinforcements are starting to arrive, and Russia has not learnt to not drive in just massive columns of vehicles like this that got smashed in 2022 and have got smashed yesterday as well. We also see that a Russian training ground, of course, I can't show this on Telegram then either, got hit by GMLRS and as well ATACMS yesterday. The amount of casualties on that, absolutely unknown. I see claims as well, like with old mate, but again, do not know. Russia has been having a lot of missile strikes against Ukrainian vehicles and positions in tree lines in Russia as well. So we see then here a strike coming down. And then this is geolocated some 11.5 kilometers, so 7 miles into Russian territory as well. So Russia is pushing back with reinforcements and of course, dropping a lot of air munitions as well from aircraft. And we see choppers working in here too with the LMURs, so the guided stuff of Kar-52s as well. Now, speaking of choppers, we need to talk about this Mi-8. Now, this has been shared everywhere going that an FPV drone for the second time, we know an FPV took down another helicopter, damaged it and crash landed. But this is saying here that this was taken down as well for this Mi-8 from FPV. Now, I've watched this footage a million times. I'm not convinced. One, it looks like it's getting smashed with EW, so it's a bit, you know, the signal sucks. But we need to look right at the end here because let's assume this has a shaped charge on it, like an RPG, most likely. Let's also assume that it can airburst as well. Let's do that. That doesn't need to hit on impact. I think that due to then coming like under the back, if anyone's ever been under a large chopper, like we were flying around in British Pumas, the rotor wash is unbelievable down below. If you want to take out a chopper, people are saying actually try and go over the top of it because it will suck it down into the props. But that if you just watch here really slow, see the back rotor here, so it looks off here and the net, so you can see the rotor wash. And seeing these last clips, it looked like it's hit the rotor wash and these tiny little drones, it looks like it's done this. So see the camera's turning off? See here? To my eye, it looks like it's off there. So see that last clip? So what I'm saying is even if it's a shaped charge, the charge will go maybe the wrong way. I'm not convinced if that was taken down or not. Is there some damage? If that back rotor is hit, is it catastrophic? Yeah. But again, I haven't seen any evidence of a crash landing or hitting the ground or anything, but it will be interesting to know too. That's just, as we see this tactic evolve with hitting choppers with FPVs, we still need to be critical of what is or isn't actually then hitting. Now, let's look at the other maps and then let's talk then about red lines as well and escalation threats, but I'll do that then after. So I'm just looking at my notes on my phone. I'm typically here with a teleprompter. So we saw overnight large attacks from Ukraine as well, and the Lipetsk airfield was one of these areas hit too. So we have satellite imagery, which is always nice and a bonus. We don't always get this little treat. We have satellite imagery of the ammo dump here, the ammo storage, the days prior, days following, well, today, absolutely then obliterated in here. Let's then read through fighter bomber. The Ukrainians sawed off the okay results from the attack on the airfield. The planes are intact, the personnel are alive, the airfield is functioning normally. So in the post before this, he said that the planes were actually then able to move. They had the time to move. That's one of the problems with using drones, is if you can get early warning on them, you've got a lot of time before they hit because drones are going significantly slower than something like a ballistic missile. Bomb depot was surrounded by barbed wire, which were stacked, as well as technical rooms and various household needs. Without them, just a bunch of bombs in one place, and bombs are consumables. And this is the thing, fuel, oil, munitions can be replaced significantly more easily than something like the airframes, especially fabs. There's so many of them. Now, I'm not saying that then this isn't a big hit. This is a big hit, but what the big thing to hit in here would be is the airframes, as the amount of production of those is significantly lower than everything else at that airfield. Now, let's have a look here at the maps and see where things are changing. So I've described where we actually are. Let's come down into New York, and we are seeing some gains out of here as well, out to the west. Now, this is then backed up on Syriac's map here as well. I don't know why this always opens like this. I wish I could just make it open that size. That in the same region, that Ukrainian army launched counterattack in the northern parts of New York, expelled the Russian forces. So we actually saw yesterday, up just in where my cursor is here, that Ukraine had an advancement. And again here, there's been then another advancement here, but Russian army took control over a series of fortifications in the western part of the town. So they've taken some ground out to the west. Ukraine took some then in the north. I don't think that's being shown. Ukraine's advancement here isn't being shown at all then on this map. Let's come down into Avdiivka. We've got a couple of updates in here, but we can see further expanding out in the direction of Pokrovsk, now 16 kilometers or under away, moving through, significantly closer to here now than to Avdiivka. So we see Syriac map not showing as much on the deep state as Syriac as per normal, but showing in the same direction. So we know that definitely there was movement in this direction in here. So we're just going to go to the north just of the Avdiivka front into Luzovotsky. Now let's have a look here, showing there has been closing up of some of these paddocks in here, not being shown on this map, not a major movement, but it does show that there is still advancements in these areas, and then the Russians are making ground here. We come down Nevelsky as well. This is an area we thought was going to come under control much quicker with the speed from Ulmansky, Netelyovo, Pervomayersky, but we can see then today that just into Nevelsky here, that it is saying that Russian forces had a very small movement just into some of these blocks here, but movement is movement. Then we come down Krasnohivka. This map is showing Russian forces in the southern side of Krasnohivka. We know there was a Ukrainian counterattack in here at one point, and it looks like that has been then retaken by Russian forces here too. But otherwise, these are just the map updates on Deep State and Syriac for the day when we line that up with what we spoke about then in the north. So we know ICC has put out an arrest warrant for Putin and other members in the senior Russian command. Now, the Ukrainian embassy in Mexico, oh my God. Oh, this is annoying me so much. This doesn't just open. Oh my God. Why? Can someone please let me know how to just open it in a square every time? The Ukrainian embassy in Mexico asked the Mexican government to arrest Russian leader Vladimir Putin if he attends the inauguration of President Claudia Sheinbaum. The embassy called Putin a war criminal, expressed gratitude to Mexico for inviting President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying, "We trust the Mexican government will comply with the international arrest warrant and hand over the aforementioned Putin to the United Nations judicial body of The Hague." So under the ICC, warrants that are out for Putin. I will also say they're out for senior members in Israel as well. And that's where we're going to talk about this. Now, the Mexican government, in August 8th, said it would not accommodate Kiev's request to arrest Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying, "We can't do that. It's not up to us." So saying that they won't do it. Now, if Putin enters any ICC country, he is meant to be then arrested, being countries like anything in the green, like Mexico down here. But it is worth noting, United States, Russia, Sudan and Israel signed the Rome Statute, but later withdrew their signatures from the ICC here too. And we can see the countries in the red and like the orangey red, such as America, China, Russia and Israel. Now, one thing I have talked about is the ICC has been then completely gutted of any credibility with then, since they've put out for Putin, which the Americans backed, they put out for Netanyahu, which the Americans said they had no jurisdiction or credibility. What has happened is a lot of people, and I've said this at the time, then said, well, if you're not willing to do it here, if you're not willing to back the body here, but you are willing to back the body here, then the body itself doesn't have any credibility. If the Americans aren't willing to hand over one of their own, why should then the Russians or Chinese or anyone else hand over one of their own? But it doesn't just play when it suits your narrative. Now, Mexico, Israel, Gaza, I think Israel, Gaza has had a huge effect on credibilities, jurisdictions of things like this, and of course relationships around the world. We'll talk about that when we talk about the red lines. We can see here that for the protection of civilians upholding legal and humanitarian obligations, Mexico voted in favour along with the majority of the world, but against were countries like the United States, and in abstention, so we have then Ukraine and then the United Kingdom here too. So you can see how this can force then countries apart. And I think the overall ripples that Israel, Gaza and where countries are sitting into things like the ICC, ICJ, UN, and these are arms of the UN, but other things have a huge effect then outwardly And we can see that United Nations, then the declaration of intervention proceedings for then South Africa v Israel, that they actually want to put in deliberate obstruction of access to humanitarian assistance and the destruction of cultural heritage as elements that should be considered in the case. So we can see where Mexico may be aligning and how events other places in the world that may have very little relation can affect much, much larger. And now that if Putin comes to the inauguration, which I don't think that he will get on a plane and travel that far, but if he comes, then he won't be arrested. And I spoke about at the time that if you're not willing to self-police, how can you want other countries to self-police also? So red lines and escalation. Now, a lot of people are saying what's happening in the north is to show the West that, hey, look, even if we push into Russia and we do this and we're seizing civilian areas and we're killing Russian convoys in Russia and this and that, that there won't be Russian escalation, that the threat of escalation is an empty threat. Not to worry about it. Give us more arms. Let us use everything inside of Russia. Now, there's a very interesting piece sent across to me, and I've put it into a doc to then look at it just more easily because the format it was in sucked, but I haven't changed anything in it, to talk about red lines and escalation. I found this very interesting. Now, I didn't write this, I'm just merely presenting it. So if you don't agree with it, that's fine. And there's a lot of points in this that can be heavily disputed or not agreed with. And the credit is to Mel Daniels. But there's a very sizable uptick in the arguing the West should expand upon its efforts to support Ukraine and defeat Russia by crossing every single remaining red line Russia has issued. This contention is predicated off the claim that Russia will not do anything, and thus the West can do as it pleases because Russia will not do anything in response. We are going to lay out the red lines and see if that is truly the case and lay out why such contentions are incredibly dangerous. While many claiming 17 Russian red lines, I'm going to combine some of them into the same grouping in order to provide proper context. So some of these are put together as well. But Russian red lines. In 1996, year that Willie was born, and at least once since 2007, warned that NATO efforts expanded into Ukraine would result in a red line violation and hurt security in Europe that would lead to a war. Result, initially a civil war in Ukraine and then a general war in Ukraine with Russia followed. In number 2, in 2014, Ukraine violated their legally binding 1997 treaty with Russia, which was a national security-based treaty. Result, Russia annexed Crimea, armed the Donbass rebel faction, and eventually military intervention inside Ukraine. In September 21, no NATO in Ukraine was declared by Russia. Result, Russia initiated military operations in Ukraine. 22, Western direct intervention in Ukraine will result in Russia responding with nuclear weapons. Result, NATO has not directly intervened. So we're seeing when there was something crossed of a red line, and when there was intervention, and when there was none or not yet has then occurred. Feb 22, NATO infrastructure not to be deployed into Ukraine, or Russia will respond with direct attack against it. Result, NATO has not deployed the infrastructure into Ukraine. So direct NATO then infrastructure in February, but we can see then there was crossings of this. Now, December 21, March 23, no NATO weapons to Ukraine, as it will escalate and make more dangerous the situation and a legitimate target for Russian forces. Result, the West has delivered a great amount of weaponry and military aid to Ukraine while Russia has not directly targeted the flow of Western weapons into Ukraine. So not sinking ships bringing over weapons. In April 22 to current, Western supply of surplus MiG-29 and other combat aircraft to Ukraine, such as the F-16. As a result, Russia will intentionally seek out and attack such aircraft and treat them as a threat. Russia has announced through its diplomatic channels via direct warnings to NATO member ambassadors that Russia will strike wherever the F-16s are located if they are used for operations against Russian force, like we've spoken about, if they could be stationed in Romania or Poland. June 22 to current, Russia warns that Western supplied long-range missiles are a red line and Russia will respond accordingly. Result, the West has provided long-range munitions to Ukraine, but Russia has not responded directly by attacking. So we haven't seen these yet. This is why we're talking about what red lines are in, what ones have had results, and what ones haven't had then a response or result. August 22 to current, Russia declared the West was not to threaten the territorial integrity of Russia. Result, Russia initiated a clearing operation in the vicinity of Kharkiv. So when there was crossings into Belgrade, then clearing operation the other way back. October, November 22, Russia stated deliveries of US-made Patriot systems would be a red line for Russia. Result, Russia began targeting all nodes inside Ukraine where Patriot systems were deployed and where Patriot systems are supported. So also contract elements to keep those up and running. As one can clearly see, Russia has more often than not followed through with their threats if red lines are crossed. There may be a chorus among some of the West that want further to cross Russian red lines. Their claims are that Russia has not done anything to reiterate against... No. Their claims are Russia has not done anything to retaliate against previous crossings of red lines and that Russia cannot do anything to the West. Firstly, this contention is further demonstrative evidence of investigation, furtherance of escalation and dangerous disregard for consequences associated with any action. The West is not at war with Russia, or so it claims. Continuing to escalate tensions with Russia does not improve the chances that conflict will not occur. Secondly, the advocation of crossing red lines presumed impunity from consequences and demonstrates investigative behaviours as opposed to peaceful resolution of the conflict as it stands 4th of August 2024. The West does not have a plan for Ukraine, nor does it have a path to achieve any sensible outcome. What is the actual plan here? We hear about the 1991 borders, we hear about this path, we hear about that, but what is the plan in place to actually then achieve this? Is it military might? Because the West is not giving Ukraine enough to do that, nor is Ukraine mobilising enough guys to do that militarily, but nor is anyone open to any other path here. Now, number 4, Ukraine is literally destroyed, millions displaced and millions more in abject poverty and despair. This is something no one talks about. There are millions of people outside of Ukraine who have left, and there are millions inside Ukraine who do live in poverty. A lot of people like to compare Ukraine, I guess, because they see Kyiv, Lviv, maybe Kharkiv to Romania, Poland, wherever else. Ukraine is still a very poor country and people do live in very hard conditions there also. And this war, of course, is not helping that. And Russia invading does not help that. Now, economically, Ukraine is ruined, and so you're in default now, as of last week. And West has now to sustain Ukraine financially, which further impacts the West taxpayer, who's already struggling under immense pressure from domestic policy failures in the US and Europe, such as what we're seeing in the UK with then immigration. But everything in Ukraine is directly funded by the West due to the occupation of Russian land, due to the expense of the war, due to so many factors here, but directly, of course, reliant on the West completely. The West has lost and spent trillions seriously in their own interest to no appreciable return. So as wider war and domestic policy failures within US and Europe, not just this is one small part of that. West has severely damaged its credibility and geographic strategically. So what I've spoken about this is the rise of the global South, how this war can affect that, how sanctions can affect that, and of course, Israel, Gaza, and the huge effects on that. It's hurt itself to such a degree that in coming decades, there will be price in blood to pay. Iran, North Korea are growing stronger and more assertive, while North Korea has now or will soon obtain advanced Russian support as it relates to missile technologies. And we've spoken about this with the shells, the dumb weapons going to Russia from North Korea, what's then coming back. And they are more assertive, especially Iran, with Israel. Look at how Iran was talking and actually acted months ago compared to then recent months. There is now a deepening Russia-Sino-Iranian axis that is fully materialised, that has now gained support from other key regional allies, all to the detriment of the collective West's benefit. We're talking China, other global South countries here. In closing, these fools who claim the US-led alliance should further cross red lines should take a moment and realise all that has occurred as a result of crossing and not respecting others' red lines. All one has to do is look at the utter mess created in Ukraine, that immense loss of life and sheer costs associated with not respecting red lines. While Russia has not responded to every red line, they just look at the ones they have responded to. It's a catastrophe and strategic disaster for the West, and most importantly to the Ukrainian people. What's worse is that people continue to listen to these fools who have been wrong non-stop since the very beginning of the conflict. One thing I will say in this though is, if then we choose not to respond to what Russia is doing, how does that play out on the global theatre as well? I fully believe that this war in Ukraine could have been completely avoided with decisions made previously. But now that we've found ourselves in this mess, what then do we do now? Because if we don't do that, how does the rest of the world and geostrategically then look at all of this? When it's all over, they'll simply conjure up a betrayal, blame others, and move on to their next disaster, leaving the mess for others to clean up. Sadly, there needs to be a modern-day Nuremberg trial for these people. This is one of the things with, if we look back to Iraq, we look back to Syria, we look to anywhere where a major power, or the Western or Russian or whoever, has gone in, destroyed something, and it's failed, that we move on and no one is ever held to account. Who's being held to account for Afghanistan? The boys lost over there, the civilians lost there, for Iraq as well. difficult. Anyway, legends, longer than I had hoped. I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.